Most men don't lack discipline, strength, or intelligence. They lack clean perception. And when perception is distorted, every action costs more than it should. Welcome back. Just again, this is Greg Swanson, the Warrior Mind podcast. And we've been discussing the four masculine archetypes, or at least two of them so far. We've talked about the king archetype and the warrior archetype and how the interplay of those happen. And today we're going to be talking about the third masculine archetype, and that is the magician archetype. So the magician archetype operates before action, before emotion, and before effort. So how can that be? It governs how reality is perceived, right? How meaning is assigned and how inner experiences is interpreted. So when it governs how our perception is projected out into reality, and then we only filter those things that agree with our perception. So perception is projected into reality, which causes it to happen. So if we perceive that the world is a dangerous place, we're going to only see those things that are dangerous for us, hence creating our reality that the world is a dangerous place. We also put the wizard assigns meaning to events. Well, if that person didn't call me, it means that they don't love me. Or if I didn't get a raise, it means that my boss doesn't like me. So all of these things come from the magician archetype. And also, if you want to put in layman's terms, our unconscious mind. But it is the archetype responsible for our orientation, meaning how we see ourselves in this world. If we see ourselves safe, in trouble, if we see ourselves confident, if we see ourselves scared, this is the orientation that the magician takes a hold of. It determines what is noticed, what is ignored, and what is assumed to be true. Notice, assumed to be true. Again, this is such a powerful archetype. You could even, again, in layman's terms, say this is really the major part of your unconscious mind. Our unconscious mind filters things that don't agree with our beliefs. It separates them. It says what to ignore, right? So we don't even know what we're ignoring because it doesn't come into our conscious awareness. But we can be rest assured through NLP and neuroscience that this magician archetype filters things out. And so we don't know what we ignore because we have ignored it by filtering it. So if we make 100% belief true that what we are seeing is true, that comes from the wizard. But we can also say, I'm only seeing 1/100th of what is available to me. And that is determined by the programs that are running within this magician archetype, right? Those assumptions really quietly shape every decision that follows, whether you realize it or not. If you think the world is going to be a dangerous place, your decisions are going to be fearful and maybe not leave the house and maybe wait to do certain things. Where if you believe that the world is a safe place, you'll go out and have adventures, you'll travel, you'll talk to people, you'll have fun. All this is determined by that magician archetype. So what the magician is, it's not intellect. It doesn't mean your IQ. It's not spirituality. It's not abstraction, not passive reflection. Most men dismiss or misuse this archetype because it doesn't look like doing, right? So this magician is not the intellect to say that you're smart to do something. It's not the spirituality part of I'm connected to a higher authority. It's not some abstraction. It's more of this programming and this building blocks of beliefs and filters, and that causes a perception which then we can work with or not work with by our doing. The core function, the magician governs perception. And this is so, so important. Like it goes in line with some of the other teachers out there, with our perception and our unconscious mind, right? It tells you what to notice, what to pay attention to. And what you pay attention to isn't necessarily true. It's only a portion of what's being allowed into your perception. So your perception is in agreement with your filters, and that would be in agreement with the action that you take. It also tells you what to ignore. And again, you don't know what you ignore because you're ignoring it, so you can't identify it. So it actually is invisible or unknown to you. And what you assume is true. This all comes, I mean, you think about it, all of this stuff is just, it's not true, it's just beliefs, right? It's beliefs on what I've noticed, what I'm going to ignore, what I'm going to assume is true, and how meaning is assigned. All of this comes from the magician. And this is really one of the more powerful archetypes because it determines what we do, how we take action, how we communicate based on what we notice, ignore, assume is true, and meaning that is assigned. So this warrior archetype actually defines the function. It's not a personality. And perception determines effort long before discipline ever shows up. So if you perceive something is going to be difficult, you're going to act as if it's difficult, and then maybe you need discipline to keep going. But if you perceive something as not difficult, then it won't be difficult, and that discipline maybe not have to be ratcheted up to the intensity that you think you need. Perception is upstream of power, and this is why effort often fails. Action is downstream. We have, the TFAR model: thoughts equals feelings equals action equals results. Well, upstream perception, which is kind of your thoughts, is upstream from your effort. And emotion is downstream from that. And discipline is downstream. So these are all, you could call these effects: action, emotion, discipline is an effect, and perception is the cause. So perception is upstream, which feeds into action, emotion, and discipline. So our perception determines what actions we're going to take, what emotions we're going to feel, and what discipline we're going to initiate. We want to reframe power away from force. So this is not forceful, it's just calm, quiet perception, which may or may not help us in achieving the goals that we want. Two men, same situation, radically different outcomes because of perception. We can see that time and time and time again, whether it's something fantastic like the Olympics or something just at a workplace environment. The boss comes, talks to both people. One person melts down, the other one's okay. Same talk, two different occurrences, two different outcomes. So why the magician must serve the king? Insight is not sovereign. So the king provides authority. Remember, we went back to the king, provides authority, it provides its vision, it sets up rules, it sets up boundaries. And the magician refines that vision based on perception, right? So if we are perceiving something, we work with the king archetype to say, hey, this is really what we want. And if it's a limiting vision, then we're going to pull back on that king's authority or vision and say, no, we can't have a kingdom of $1 million a year. We can only have a kingdom of 50,000 a year. So the magician refines the vision. It could be refined better, or it could be refined holding us back. Insight without structure drifts. So we have this, if we don't have the structure of the king, the insight's going to go all over the place. And so we need both of these archetypes to work together to create a framework for our vision and create a framework for the action, the warrior, that we're going to take. Awareness must serve standards. So we have standards, and you can call it a code of honor, and I've used that term many, many times, is when we have this code of honor, awareness, meaning what we see, then must agree with that code of honor. And we all have our standards. We are living according to our standards. We may not know exactly what they are, but if you look at your reality and your results, that's a reflection of your standards. If you don't like what you're seeing or results, then you need to change your standards, and awareness must serve that. Advanced, this is when we're talking about this advanced archetypal integration, meaning the magician now is going to be integrated with the warrior and the king from a vision and an action perspective, but it's all based on perception. The magician has a correctiveness to the warrior, right? Refining strength, not weakening it. The magician will interrupt blind momentum, right? That momentum from the warrior just out there slashing, burning, whatever it may be, or taking action, or maybe the weak warrior and not taking action. But the magician will interrupt this blind momentum and cause it to be realigned. It reveals wasted effort when the warrior is out there and doing the same thing over and over and over and over again and not getting the results. The magician comes in and helps reveal that this effort really isn't achieving anything and it's wasted and time to rethink it. It reduces unnecessary struggle, right? We think that struggle all the time. If we look at struggle, it really comes from awareness of lack because of we're lacking something that is difficult to get, so we're going to struggle. And so the magician reduces unnecessary struggle by helping change the perception. And it preserves precision, right? So the magician wants to have precise action because it's thinking in a precise way. And so it'll inform the king and the warrior to take this precise action, right? So this shows how the magician sharpens execution rather than slowing it, meaning when the magician is working with the warrior, the actions are more refined. They're more on purpose. Every action has a reason and a purpose and an outcome associated with it, as opposed to just chasing shiny objects and hoping something will work. The healthy magician, so we want to look at how to integrate this. It's grounded awareness, embodied perception, it's reduced reactivity, so we respond instead of react. And it has cleaner decisions, more precise decisions. And it gives the nervous system a felt sense of what right looks like. And again, this is basically integrating this healthy magician into our awareness. Is we have this awareness, this grounded awareness that's based in solid information as opposed to storytelling. So then we look at the shadow magician. We've talked about the shadow king and the shadow warrior. So let's take a look at the shadow magician. It overanalyzes, right? It's paralysis by analysis. It's intellectualized emotion. Well, I'm feeling this way because blah, blah, and they put all this logic behind it. And that's the shadow side of it because it's hiding, right? The shadow part is hiding. And it's delayed action because, well, what if this happens? What if that happens? And those are all part of perceptions. And perception as an escape. It tries to see perceptions that maybe not be there, and it's an escape to either do things or not do things. So you want to name the shadow, but without shame, because it's all part of these archetypes, right? We all have this shadow part in us. So we just want to name it and going, oh, that's the shadow part, or to call it, another name and going, oh, okay, now I can move beyond it. And so here's the table, right? The healthy magician, perception serves clarity, where the shadow magician, perception replaces responsibility. The healthy magician, insights refines action, where the shadow magician, insights delay action. On the healthy magician, awareness is embodied, and on the shadow, awareness is detached. And with the healthy magician, meaning stabilizes, and the shadow, meaning destabilizes. What we want to do is look at pattern recognition, then self-diagnostics, and then insight. So we can see when we see which attribute belongs to which side, the shadow or the healthy, we can recognize a pattern. We can do some self-diagnostics on why is this happening. Then we have insight to change it. So perception as the true source of power. Power is not the force, but perception. Accurate perception reduces effort. Distorted perception multiplies strain. Clarity conserves energy. The magician removes unnecessary struggle. Philosophical synthesis plus lived applications. That's what we're talking about. Integrating the magician archetype is not about acquiring more information. It's about disciplining attention. Awareness must be trained to serve clarity rather than indulgence. This integration requires submitting insight to authority, right? Allowing decisions to be made rather than endlessly analyzing. Like when you make a decision, you stay with it and you keep that decision, not flopping back and forth. When integrated, the magician becomes almost invisible because it's just part of perception, taking action, etc. Life feels less dramatic, not because it lacks depth, but because perception is no longer inflating tension. Strengthen sharpens as waste disappears. If you want to see the show notes on this podcast, you can visit warriormindcoach.com. While you're over there, you can find some more useful information in the form of blog posts and other podcasts. And you'll also see how to book your power strategy call. Since you'll be on the internet, please follow me on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and Pinterest, all under Warrior Mind Coach.